Tetragrammaton.
Originally, but I was putting myself through college making pottery. I went to Long Beach State University, which was the clay school. That was where anyone who wanted to develop their skills, there were 2 doctors of ceramics teaching there, and it kind of ran its course. And even though there's really interesting stuff that like industrial design, things that I'm really interested in, I decided after 2 years of that it wasn't the direction I needed to be in. And I walked literally down the hill to the journalism department, walked into a teacher's office and says, how do I become a journalism major? He said, do this, do this, do this. I graduated with a degree in journalism, and because I was a surfer, I did my internship at Surfing Magazine, which was in San Clemente. It was perfect. They were going from a bi-monthly to a monthly. I fit right in. I made myself indispensable. They hired me, and I ended up working at the magazine on site for 5 years.
Wow.
But during that period, there was a guy working as a writer, and he was a surfer, but he was also a screenwriter. And he and I got to be friendly, and he invited me on a river rafting trip, and there was a pre-rafting party, and at that party was a woman named Dory. And Dory struck me. She made an impression on me, even though I was there with my girlfriend. A year later, I'm going through a terrible breakup, and Dory's going through a divorce. And I say to my friend Mark, I say, do you think Dory'd ever date me? And she finally relented. And that is 43 years ago.
Congratulations.
Yes.
Meant to be, clearly.
And that's a long way of telling you that Dory was a screenwriter then and encouraged me to write a script. I did, and it got shown around town, and it got me meetings and all this. I was in the hunt. I wrote a second script. Jeff Katzenberg at Disney read it. One day I was a surfer. The next day I was a Hollywood screenwriter with an office and a secretary in the animation building at Disney. It was amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it happened really fast.
What was that script that he liked about?
I would call it in the vein, it's really not in my wheelhouse, but in the vein of kind of Ghostbusters. It was kind of a big, rollicking kind of comedy. And he liked it. It was called Bad O. I wouldn't show it to anyone now. Mm-hmm. But the original script that I wrote, which was much closer to my heart, was called National Pastime. It was I grew up in a suburb of Los Angeles called Bellflower. It was about 3 kids in a city like I grew up in who don't know that they have ways to get out of the draft or going to war. And national pastime being the obvious metaphor for that. That was really the script that got me in the door. And then this second script got me a 3-picture deal.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Out of the box.
Out of the box. And so that was for writing movies, and I met with Brian Grazer, did a script for him. I had an office in the animation building at Disney, and producers would come by and they'd knock on the door and say, hey, are you interested in doing TV? And I never said no. I said, yes, I'll do it.
You're a surfer. You're
I'm a kid from Bellflower and a surfer, and people are knocking on my door at Disney saying, you want to work for us? So I said yes to everything. And so I did some Disney Sunday movies because they had revived that. It was something that was part of my childhood, the Disney Sunday movie. Yeah. So I did a couple of those things. I did one with my wife, and I did a pilot at Disney for NBC. And during the filming of that pilot, I realized I couldn't just be a writer if I wanted to protect my work. I needed to be a producer. And the pilot didn't get picked up at NBC, but I made an impression. And I said to them, look, I'd like to work as a producer if you can give me a job. And they said, great, today I'll offer you 3 different jobs. The first job was on Miami Vice, And, Miami Vice, hit. The second job was on, I think it was called Vegas. It was also another Michael Mann show, something of a hit. And then the third choice was a show called Rags to Riches, which is about 5 little dancing girls and a kind of daddy Warbucks character played by Joe Bologna. We'll put you on that show immediately. So I looked at all my options, and Miami Vice was shot and produced in Miami, but the writers and the writing producers were in Los Angeles. And the same thing with Vegas. It was shot in Vegas, but the writing producers were on the studio lot. But Rags to Riches was shot in Culver City, and I would be right there working with the team. I seized that opportunity.
To be more hands-on.
I wanted to learn
Yeah.
how to produce, not how to write and then have somebody else
Not
produce
hand
my
it
work.
off.
Yes, I wanted to be a real producer.
Yeah.
It was 5 dancing girls, so I got to work with choreographers, I got to work with the composers, I got to work with costume, I got to work with everyone, production designer, and it was fantastic.
How old were you at the time?
Probably early 30s, but it was great. And I took that job and I stayed at NBC a little longer, but then I got hired by a guy named Peter Roth to write pilots for 20th Century Fox.
How new was Fox at that time? This is the Fox network.
Fox Network had just, Married with Children. It was kind of establishing itself as the something more than a Johnny-come-lately. So it was kind of a heady time there with lots of energy.
Just years old, would you say? Several years old?
I'd say probably 3, possibly 4.
That's a brand new network.
Basically brand new.
Yeah.
Even though I was hired by the 20th Century Fox studio, not by the network. So the idea was that I would create for not just Fox, but I could create for all the other networks as well. But of course, Fox was the big push. So I came up with this idea, which became the X-Files. And we literally walked upstairs to the network to sell it to the network.
Yeah.
And I pitched my heart out. Bob Greenblatt, the guy I pitched to, who went off to his own stellar career, wrote a chapter about that in his memoir. And it was funny. He said, "I remember you asked for water," because, I was nervous. I was full of nervous energy. So anyway, they didn't buy it in the room. So we went back to the drawing board, and I just so happened I knew a psychologist who knew about a study called a Roper survey about the number of Americans who believed in the alien abduction phenomenon. And even though I had pitched it as such,
Yeah.
that I brought in hard evidence of it, or, something of evidence,
Yeah.
I think put them over the top in the second pitch.
Because at first it sounded too way out for them, but you showed them this is something people are actually interested in.
Yes, there was nothing else like it on TV, but I wrote them a 18-page single-spaced outline. I involved them every step of the way in the process. They ordered the pilot. We were going to make it in Los Angeles, and we started to go through those motions, and there's a big portion of the script that takes place in the forest. And there aren't good forests really in what they call the zone for shooting in LA. So the suggestion was we go to Vancouver, and as it worked out, I had been to Vancouver in 1986. My wife did a Disney Sunday movie with her partner, and I got to visit, and I saw these amazing forests. It was like meant to be.
Yeah.
So we moved the production up to Vancouver. It was during pilot season, so that means everyone is shooting pilots up there, and we're the last people to arrive. And so we get the last people to be hired. It was everyone was taken.
Yeah.
But undaunted, we put together a crew up there, brought some people from Los Angeles, produced this pilot, and I got a call very early on. They still didn't know what it was. And I got a call very early on. There's a scene where Moulder and Scully are in his hotel room, and she's got something on her back, and he wants to see what it is, and she kind of bares her skin to him. And I got a call angry call from a studio executive that there wasn't enough sexual tension in that scene. And it's like,
That's not what it is.
They still don't get what exactly. They
Yeah.
still don't get what the show is. They still think it's, I would call it formulaic television.
Yeah.
So I calmed them down, and we went and we finished the pilot, and that's a story in itself. We came back, edited, temp score, got it to the studio, then to the network, and they had a screening of it. And the story that I was told, I wasn't at the screening, was that Rupert Murdoch was in the room. And so they screened the pilot, and of course, the lights come up and it finishes, and everyone, of course, is looking to Rupert Murdoch, wondering what his reaction could be before they react. And he turned around and he clapped.
Wow.
And it was that instant that kind of set that ship flotilla.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Do you remember where the original idea came from? Like, what were the starting pieces before you wrote anything?
Yeah. When I was a teenager, there was a show. It was two-part movies. I can't even remember now. Called Kolchak the Night Stalker.
I saw that as a
You
kid.
did?
I did.
I thought it was the best thing I'd ever seen on television. Cool. I watched a lot of television as a kid.
Yeah.
I loved it.
What other things did you watch? Tell me about your viewing habits.
If I start to think about what I watched during that time, I remember we watched every Friday night. We watched the Brady Bunch, Partridge Family, and Love American Style in a row. I loved it. That was like my Friday night. Yeah. But there were shows on like Mannix and
I watched all of those.
Yeah,
every one of those.
Same. And I just loved them. And
they were great shows.
They were great shows.
They were great shows.
Mike Connors was great.
Great.
Yeah, that was kind of my childhood. But Kolchak the Night Stalker really stuck with me. And so when I was at NBC, as I mentioned, Brandon Tartikoff was the main. He was the main man. He had like how many seasons of being number one at NBC. So he was a just revered character.
He was the younger guy, right?
He's a younger guy, and it so happened that I was a baseball player growing up, and there was a softball game that I got included into, and Brandon was a player. So were a lot of other notable people. Anyway, we became kind of friendly, and he kind of saved me through some of those lean years by throwing me some work. I remember pitching to him the idea of doing a Kolchak the Night Stalker, and it didn't fly. He had no interest in doing it, but I held on to the idea.
Yeah.
And when Peter Roth had hired me, we went to lunch and both agreed we liked Kolchak the Night Stalker and kind of do something like that. So I had this idea about doing an FBI show. I had an idea about a believer and a skeptic.
How did the idea of the FBI being involved? Because I don't think Kolchak was an FBI guy.
No, Kolchak was like a newspaper reporter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So the FBI, because I had read something where the FBI actually investigated something called satanic ritual abuse. And that's where people believe that they've been abducted by a cult and subjected to ritual abuse, which sounds kind of X-Filean.
Yeah.
But I thought if the FBI is investigating something like that, they must be investigating aliens. And I had some interest in the alien phenomenon too.
Did you ever go to a UFO convention in those days?
Oh, yeah. I actually wrote a New York Times op-ed about that. There were 2 reboots of the show in the last several years. My convention experience really shaped those stories.
Great. I used to go to those as well. I love those.
They're amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Just interesting people, interesting lectures.
Yes.
A lot of open-minded thought.
Yeah. And, conspiracies galore. And I've had experiences where I was invited to a meeting by a guy who was one of these, he wasn't a conspiracy monger, it was a little more highbrow than that, but he invited me to a meeting with several other people where our phones were taken away from us.
Yeah.
When we entered the.
Remember his name or no?
Oh yeah, his name's Foster Gamble, and he had a website called Thrive. Anyway, and he did a movie, and I helped him with the movie. And anyway, he invited me to this meeting. He wanted to know how best to market free energy devices. So it's like, really? You've got them? something you're going to bring to the world. And yes, that was the answer. They had free energy devices, and so they asked us how we should market them, and I said, you want to get these to everyone, right?
Yeah.
Walmart. It's the biggest retailer in America. Get them out there. And they thought that was a little bit too plebeian. I don't know what the word I would use. So it was never decided, but that was probably a dozen years ago. And the free energy devices have never appeared, but it was a great story.
Yeah, great story.
Yeah.
Great story. So you have the Kolchak experience as a
Yes.
kid.
Yeah.
You take that with you, and then you decide FBI, and you have this experience. Was it in a newspaper? You read the story about the FBI going into the satanic...
I don't remember where I read that, but I did a lot of reading, and I've always been a reader. So I picked it up somewhere.
Yeah.
But it just felt weird to me that...
Yeah, it's one of those stories, like,
Yeah.
it doesn't really make sense in your world.
Yeah.
And that makes it interesting.
Yeah, exactly. So my brother's a scientist, so I'm interested in science.
Yeah.
And he's 5 years younger than I am, and a brilliant guy, teaches at MIT. He's a very serious scientist, and I would go to him during the run of the show and run things by him. And on the pilot, for example, there's a scene where Mulder and Scully are on a road, and their car loses power, and it comes to a stop, and Mulder looks at his watch and he says, "We lost 9 minutes." And Scully, the scientist, says, "You can't lose 9 minutes. Time is a universal constant." And so I gave that script to my brother, and he read it, and he said, "I like this, I like this." He says, "But time is not a universal constant. Time is a universal invariant." So he contributed, in his way.
Refined it.
He refined it.
Or fact-checked it, really.
He was my fact checker, but
Right.
I had a number of people like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, the scientist, the skeptic, and
Yes.
the believer, because I'm a believer. I want to believe, just
Yes.
like the poster says. Show me the proof. I want to believe it. I believe you, but
Yeah,
prove
you
it-
want to
prove it
see
me.
more. Yes.
Exactly. So that was something that meant a lot to me too. And Scully wears a cross around her neck, so it makes her an even more.
She's the scientist.
She's a scientist, but also a person of faith.
Yes. How
Yeah.
does faith play into the whole story, do you think?
I think that it makes her an interesting character because faith and science aren't necessarily compatible so much of the time. But I think of science as the search for God. We're going to find God through our search for things like quantum physics.
Yes.
So I thought that was a kind of interesting way to mold that character. And then Mulder, the believer, I described him, I think, as a MTV VJ in the pilot script,
Yeah.
because I wanted him to have that kind of energy. And David Duchovny came in, and that, this is also a story unto itself, where David and Jillian came in to read for the parts. Jillian gave me, during the run of the show, the pages. Whenever you do a casting session, you're handed pages with the prospective actors' names on them, and you make your notes on those pages. And I had done just that, made those notes. And on David's, it said yes, simply. And on Jillian's, it said test. David was somewhat of an unknown, but she was a complete unknown. So I wanted to bring her before the
She was more
studio
green than he was.
Very much more green. And she's like 24 years old, playing not only an FBI agent, but a doctor,
Yeah.
medical doctor. They struck me right away. And there was a lot of pushback, actually, to get my way, because they were thinking that Scully should be a babe. They were thinking that it was kind of a television formula to make the beautiful girl and the handsome guy. And even though they're both very attractive, they didn't quite fit people's ideas of what television stars were. So I had a pretty clear idea from the get-go what I wanted from those characters and what I wanted the spirit and tone of the pilot to be. As I said, I wrote that very detailed outline, and it was magic from the beginning. I still remember the meeting, Mulder and Scully meet in his office. And we really, even though there had been some work with them together, and they tested together for the job. We hadn't really seen them, with cameras in front of them. And it was magic from the beginning. Just worked. The rest is history.
Tell me more about what you knew about the characters before you met the actors.
Yeah.
How you envisioned them, and how you envisioned the show before anything ever happened, just the idea stage.
I have to say the pilot pretty much approximates my vision. It's about somebody who has absolute faith in something that he's got no proof of. His sister was abducted. That's the foundation of his faith. And he wants to prove it. And of course, he wants to find his sister. So that was, for me, that was his holy grail.
If a person's sister is abducted, it seems reasonable to believe it when it happens in your life.
Yes, exactly.
Seems perfectly reasonable.
Yes. And, he had repressed memories, or memories that had been stolen, possibly.
Wow.
And we recreated that moment at some point early on in the series.
Beyond the two characters, what else did you know before you started of what this show was?
It's a procedural of some sort. You could call it a genre piece, but it's a synthesized genre piece: horror, thriller, procedural. It has a mythology. And then it actually, in addition to that, it became a kind of comedy show. And even though there's, I would call it light comedy in the pilot, it inspired comedic episodes that would appear between the dramatic episodes and the mythology episodes and the horror. These comedy episodes where the Mulder and Scully played broad comedy, and somehow the audience would go with you. They would go from this dramatic episode about Mulder's mother and his father and his sister, and Scully's mother and father and her sister, very personal stories. And then it's like, oh, let's do a comedy episode here. So the show that you see now, the original 202 episodes, was a show that, even though it was spawned from the pilot and the character ideas and the concept for the show, it actually developed a life of its own.
Did you have many story ideas in advance of making the pilot, or at the time of the pilot, was there just the pilot?
I developed a whole, I don't know, do you call it a lookbook? I don't know, about what the series was going to be. It wasn't required, it wasn't demanded of me to do that, but I just had kind of a marketing sense about how I needed to sell the pilot, and I made up photos, episode descriptions, and I wish I had it today because it would be fun to go through it again.
Yeah. Are X-Files a real thing, or is that's a made-up idea?
Yeah, a made-up idea, X standing for the unknown. But when I read about the satanic ritual abuse...
It was inspired by something that you knew about,
exactly.
but you gave it a name.
Yes, and I thought that, of course, they would put that unit in the basement because they were kind of the outcast unit, investigating things that go bump in the night, and originally in the pilot, the cigarette-smoking man, this character who becomes the kind of evil genius in the show, he's there to encourage the FBI, using Scully, to debunk the X-Files, so they'll quit looking for what he actually controls, which is the government's knowledge about UFOs. And simply the overarching concept is the government knows things they're not telling you. And that comes right from my Watergate childhood and Pentagon Papers childhood.
Yeah.
And it was of the spirit of the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And then Ronald Reagan kind of skirted that. But when we got to Clinton, it was the same thing. There was still a distrust of the U.S. government. And that's a whole other story that we could
let's do it. It feels like that still goes on now.
Without a doubt.
Maybe more so than ever.
It could be. And, we live in a conspiracy, awash in conspiracies now.
In a world of artificial highs and harsh stimulants, there is something different. something clean, something precise. Athletic nicotine, not the primitive products found behind convenience store counters, not the aggressive buzz that leaves you jittery, but a careful calibration of clean energy and focused clarity. Athletic nicotine, the lowest dose tobacco-free nicotine available, made entirely in the USA. No artificial sweetener, just pure, purposeful elevation. Athletic nicotine is a performance nootropic. Athletic nicotine is a tool for shifting mindsets. Athletic nicotine is a partner in pursuit of excellence. Slow release, low dose, gradual lift, sustained energy, soft landing, inspired results. Athletic nicotine, more focus, less static. Athletic nicotine, more clarity, less noise. Athletic nicotine, more accuracy, less anxiety. Athletic nicotine, from top athletes pushing their limits to artists pursuing their vision. Athletic nicotine offers the lift you've been looking for. Learn more at athleticnicotine.com/tetra and experience next level performance with Athletic Nicotine.
Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical.
Tell me a little bit about the culture at the time that you started the show. What else was going on? What else was on TV?
I can tell you what I was up against from the starting block. There was a show that was being produced by Fox that the guy who ran the network, a guy named Sandy Grushow, was sure that was the hit, and we were the also ran. It was called Briscoe County Jr., or The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., and Briscoe County Jr. was the name of the character, believe it or not. And that show ended up, it came and went. We outlasted everyone, but I'm trying to think what was on at the time. Stephen Bochco shows were very popular. NYPD Blue, I think, was on at the time, or roughly that time. We had just come off of LA Law, if it wasn't still on. Those were the kinds of dramas people were watching.
And this wasn't that different in format, more just in subject matter it was different. Would you say that?
Well, it was different in format too. Even though it, was a 4-act structure.
Yeah.
Everything was a 4-act structure. So it was similar in that sense. I want to tell you an interesting story because I'm thinking about that. So the show ended up, I would say, it had a kind of rhythm to it. And I think it was a rhythm unlike anything else on television. And we used that 4-act structure, as a lot of people did, with cliffhangers at the end of each act. So we made the pilot, and they, of course, need to test it, to put it in front of an audience and get the audience reaction. It's a really interesting process. They have people that they've brought in, average folk, TV watchers, and they put them in a room sitting at a desk with a dial that they can turn. If they like something, they turn it up. If they don't like something, they turn it down. Pretty simple process. And so they're watching it on their monitor. We've got a monitor up in our room, and it's got a graph on it because they, collected data from the like it or don't like it. And so they start watching the show and they like it, the graph is going up and up and up. And all of a sudden, whoa, the graph goes down. And it's like, oh no. They don't like that. And then it peaks again, and then it drops again, then it peaks again, and then it drops again, peaks again. And I'm watching it, and I'm realizing I go through a lot of this, it's really anxiety producing. Yeah. I go through it, and I realize that's the nature and quality of drama. Yeah. Was tension and release, and of music, for that matter. And it was like a revelation. It can't just be all 120 miles an hour.
No.
It's got to have rest.
You have to pull the bow back.
Exactly.
Before you release it.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. I was an archer, so I actually have an appreciation of that, physical state.
Do you think the otherworldly aspects of the show was the thing that most drew people to it?
I always say the show became a hit because of David and Gillian, Moulder and Scully.
The relationship or the characters?
The relationship and the characters. You could tell that they loved each other and they respected each other, but they came at life from completely different angles. And it's that relationship and the tension and the respect. And you know what? It just comes down to that love. It took so long for it to be stated, acted upon. It was the secret sauce for the show, which is sexual tension from characters that you love and respect.
Yeah.
He had tremendous amount of respect for her and she for him.
Yeah.
And it was that gave the show its gravity.
Considering they're FBI agents in the show, are there any requirements? Like, does the government have to approve your shows?
This is a really interesting thing is I write this pilot and I call up the FBI and ask them some questions, and they're kind of reluctant to answer my question. Who are you? What are you doing? What's your name? Never heard of you. So they were reluctant to answer my questions originally. And then the show got picked up. And all of a sudden we get a call from the FBI and who are you? What are you doing? And I thought, oh no, they're gonna shut us down. The FBI is actually—
Could they have shut you down?
Of course not. It was nerve-wracking because the FBI were not portrayed necessarily in a good light. But of course they didn't shut us down, and soon enough they became secret fans of the show. And by the time the first season aired, we got invited to Quantico, and we got we got the Jodie Foster treatment, as they call it.
So cool.
Yeah, and actually that talking about what inspired the show and the idea, and the FBI was I love Silence of the Lambs, and Scully doesn't have red hair by mistake. That was right from Jodie Foster.
Yeah.
So that was the FBI was, of course, front and center for me.
Did you ever get to talk to them about what did they like, what they didn't
Oh
like?
yeah, and but everything was off the record, and I got to meet with people who work in the profiling, you know, just like Clarice Starling worked in the behavioral profilers. I got to meet with them, hang out with them. We got to shoot in the firing range. You know, it was like it was Disneyland, and that's the way it continued. I became friendly with FBI agents. I actually took a course at the FBI. So it was an immersion for me. We both benefited mutually because actually people became interested in the FBI. There's something called the Scully effect. And women, predominantly, it changed the course of their lives and their careers. People became scientists, you know, STEM scientists, and even FBI agents, because of Agent Scully. And that's actually one of the things I'm most proud of, is that it actually affected people's lives as something other than just entertainment.
She demonstrated a different course available.
Yes, she did.
Would the FBI ever say, hey, you got this wrong, this is how we would do it? Or would you ever contact them and say, hey, this is what's happening, how would you guys handle this?
It's more like that we would say, what would you do if? What would you do if?
Yeah.
You know, the show, I always say, without Scully, without the skeptic, the show wouldn't have made it. All the science fiction is based on real science, and we were rigorous about making the science absolutely real. And it came from a lot of research on our part before the internet, where we would actually go to scientists and say, what if this, this, and this? And the show is based on those two words, what if?
Yeah.
What if this science could be proven to be this science fiction? So Scully is the anchor for the show, and Moulder is the person who is being pulled back from outer space.
So many of the subjects covered in the show at the time seemed so way out and unbelievable. And so many of them have come to pass in the world. Remarkably so.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. The first big one was clones. When they cloned that sheep Dolly, you know, we were playing clones were science fiction, and all of a sudden it wasn't the case anymore. And there are so many things like that in the show.
Nanobots.
Yes.
Things that now that you read about in the paper now, you were talking about 30 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. AI.
Yeah.
Although AI's been around a really long time.
Where would all of those potential future ideas come from to make it into the show and then to make it into the world?
You hire a group of people really talented people, which is the secret to the success of the show, and secret to my success is based on the smart, talented, good work of a select group of people who had good ideas and who made the show what it is. And they do, you know, the writers come in, it's not like they're just doing your concept. They are recreating, developing your concept. And it so happened that I either hired or was suggested that I hired just the right people to make it work. And
would they do research as well? Because
yes.
it's not just like made up fiction.
No.
It always seems like it's rooted in something.
Yes, it's rooted in science, or it's rooted in conspiracies. It's rooted in, you know, just like satanic ritual abuse. I had a neighbor growing up who believed, this young woman, that she had been subjected by her family to satanic ritual abuse. Things like that. Someone told me I had a dream. I saw a ghost. You know, a lot of it was pulled from thin air like that.
Have you ever had a metaphysical experience in your life?
Well, I'd like to say I haven't, but like anyone who's experienced kismet, serendipity, coincidence, deja vu, I've had all those things, and I have thoughts about that too.
Yeah. It was a long time, or many episodes, before we ever saw an ET.
Yeah. The law was laid down by me that we are not going to see an alien for 5 years.
Yeah.
Of course, we saw an alien first episode of season 2.
Because clearly on the show, we get the impression they're aliens, but by not seeing them, there's always this doubt.
Yes, exactly.
And was the plan to keep that as long as possible?
Keep it as long as possible.
Yeah.
And like all the rules I laid down, everyone broke them freely.
Yeah. How did it change once you see an alien?
Yeah.
It's really a different show, no?
It is. And I was given very good advice, and I've spoken about this, you know, since the beginning, that one of the reasons this show succeeded is a conversation I had with a man named Rick Carter, no relation, but 40-year-old friendship, and now an Academy Award-winning production designer, but he has been Steven Spielberg, among other top directors, their production designer. And when I wrote the pilot, I gave it to him to read. He had just done 44 episodes of a Spielberg series called Amazing Stories. And they had worked, you know, 22 episodes in a season, and they were all different. So no standing sets, you know, just, it's really hard to do what they had done. Then the show was canceled after the second season, and that was right when I gave him the X-Files pilot. And he read it, and he said, I like this. He says, but I'm going to give you some really good advice. He says, you're not going to have any time or any money, so put all the scary stuff in the shadows. Let us imagine the scary stuff, and you're going to get a lot of mileage, and you're actually going to be able to produce a show. And that was such sage advice. It really saved us.
Yeah.
Because they always stack the odds against you, because they know, you know, in their hearts you're going to fail.
Yeah.
You know, most things fail. But that advice really set the path that we started on, and the cinematography became dark, which is great for the feel and atmosphere of the show. We were in Vancouver, which has free atmosphere. Everything contributed to that cinematic experience that was scarier by what you imagined than by what you saw.
Yeah, our imagination is much wilder than anything you can show on the screen.
Always, yes.
So if you imply it, everyone gets to make their own scary monster.
Exactly. That's, you know, that's the secret to movie making right there.
Yeah.
So much of today's life happens on the web. Squarespace is your home base for building your dream presence in an online world. Designing a website is easy, using one of Squarespace's best-in-class templates. With the built-in style kit, you can change fonts, imagery, margins, and menus, so your design will be perfectly tailored to your needs. Discover unbreakable creativity with Fluid Engine, a highly intuitive drag-and-drop editor. No coding or technical experience is required. Understand your site's performance with in-depth website analytics tools. Squarespace has everything you need to succeed online. Create a blog, monetize a newsletter, make a marketing portfolio, launch an online store. The Squarespace app helps you run your business from anywhere. Track inventory and connect with customers while you're on the go. Whether you're just starting out or already managing a successful brand, Squarespace makes it easy to create and customize a beautiful website. Visit squarespace.com/Tetra and get started today.
How would you decide to add a new character over time? How would that happen? And how would you decide when a new character came, whether that character was going to stay or whether they were just on one episode?
You've got to be bold. To kill off a popular character is kind of shooting yourself in the foot. But we did that. We would put characters everyone came to know and love. And at the end of the first season, for example, there's a character named Deep Throat, and he dies at the end, and his last dying words are "trust no one." And it became a kind of, that was the hook.
What was his character?
He was Deep Throat. He was like Deep Throat in
the Watergate story.
In the Watergate story, All the President's Men, which continues to be a movie I watch every year.
Yeah.
What is remarkable about that movie to me is everyone knows the outcome of that movie when you sit down to watch it. And yet it's still riveting.
Yeah.
It's an intense experience. And I wanted to bring that experience to the show too.
Yeah. One of the stars gets pregnant in real life. And I imagine you weren't expecting that.
No.
And how do you deal with that?
It's funny. It was really a fork in the road. I had a network executive say to me, "You've got to fire her. You got to replace her. We can't have a pregnant actress on the show who plays a chaste scientist." And, when the people spending the money are giving you the orders, and that's the way it works, you have to take it seriously. Anyway, I told them I didn't want to get rid of her. I thought I'd make her disappear with a storyline. And sure enough, I was able to have Scully abducted. And we had to shoot around her pregnancy for a time. I remember I did a scene where she's at a supermarket checking out, and something happens with the scanner or something. There's something paranormal happens, and we just hid her behind the all the stuff at the counter.
You could only see her head.
You could only see her head, exactly.
Yeah. Was that a common thing where things would happen in real life and it would impact what was possible to do?
Yeah, and that's the big one, is that with Scully's abduction, it really changed the way the mythology.
And you were never
developed.
Planning on that originally?
No, that just happened. We had to figure it out on the fly.
Yeah.
It's part of the mystery of doing what we do and of doing what you do is discovery and accident and revolutionary things on the show that change your mind. That said, and this is another rabbit hole, when the show got to be like in season 7 or so, and we had this mythology, and the mythology was really the way to deal with Moulder and Scully's personal lives and their relationship to Moulder's sister's abduction, among other things. That's what Scully believes and what she's seen. We did a movie in year 5 of the show, and it just so happens that Scully is lying in the snow and ice when a UFO takes up, and of course she's turned away, she's indisposed, and she turns away and she never sees the spaceship. So it's stuff like that that we played with, but I was going to say that in like season 7 I realized that the stories almost start telling themselves because you've laid down so much foundation that the shape of the building is dedicated to what you have already laid out.
Would you ever look back to old episodes to find loose threads that you could continue?
Yes, and there were keepers of that Faith, Frank Spotnitz came to work on we were in the same book club early on. He was writing for Entertainment Weekly. I hired him in season 2 of the show, and we became kind of keepers of the mythology, and would do roughly 4 mythology shows a season.
So those would be personal shows based on
Yes, on
their backstories and their relationship.
and the relationship, but also on what the government knew and wasn't telling us about aliens and UFOs. Yeah.
Did the scientist ever have a metaphysical experience during the course of the show?
Oh yeah. Yeah. At one point we switched it, so she became the believer and he became the skeptic.
Very interesting.
Yeah. It was a big moment and a big direction change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did it impact her to become a believer? What's
Right.
that like when someone is
Yeah.
a person of science
Yeah.
and who gets shown
Yeah.
something that they can't believe?
Yeah.
What happens?
It's almost like, not believing your own eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she did believe her own eyes, for she questioned whether what she saw
Yeah.
was actually what she saw.
She's a scientist at heart.
Yeah.
And we can go into what she saw and what it's all about. And actually, I'm going to jump forward with you here just a little bit. The last 2 seasons of the show, we did, I think, 6 episodes and then 10 episodes. Came back to do what they called season 11 and season 12, even though during the first 9 years of the show, we would typically do 22 to sometimes 25 episodes a season. It was a lot.
Wow.
Anyway, but we came back and we did these episodes, and I was a big fan of the Now Scarred My Struggle books. I
I don't know this book.
There are a number of them, and they are detailed accounts of this guy Now Scarred's life. I just loved them. So I decided to do 4 episodes called My Struggle. It was Moulder's struggle, Scully's struggle, the cigarette smoking man, the evil villain struggle, and then the struggle of Mulder and Scully's son. They actually have a baby together, and they end up having to give the baby away to keep it safe, and that baby has grown to a young man, and that reunion was long hoped for by X-Files fans. So I wanted to deal with that at the very end of the show. And so through those 4 episodes, which continue to be largely misunderstood, I developed possibly what is the biggest idea that the X-Files has ever posited. And I'll tell you that it's going to affect, the X-Files is about to be rebooted.
Really?
Yes, by this guy, Ryan Coogler, this, very successful movie director, has a movie in the theaters right now called Sinners, big hit. He's going to do it. He wants to do it with a diversity cast, but he's got something to deal with that he's not aware of yet. And that is that Scully's character will come to know shortly something that will not only change the course of her life, career, biology, but the course of all of our lives and for generations to come. So it's a big idea that I built in, and I laid it out sparingly and kind of cryptically and vaguely, but at the very end, I lay in a clue that to this day, I think 4 years later, no one has figured out. And so I'm really looking forward to the revelation.
Wow.
And,
So there's a clue hanging out there
there's a clue hanging out there.
that no one's picking up on,
Yes,
but that leads to a very big story coming.
very big.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you think about this all the time?
I think about it every time I read something. I think, that's interesting. It's everything. How it is.
Yeah.
And your book
Yeah.
spells it out. It's the nature of art
Yeah.
and artists.
We're
And
given clues everywhere we look.
all you do is open your eyes.
Yeah.
Driving down the street. Be a careful driver like I am, but look around.
Yeah.
Just open your eyes to life and the world. And I walk outside every night and
make
look at the
notes?
stars. I make notes. I have to force myself to make notes because I always think I have a great memory,
Yeah.
and it's not as good as I'd like it to be.
Yeah. I find if I don't write things down that it's
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Yeah.
Sometimes I even write it down and then don't know what it means later. That's
Right.
how
Right.
gone it is.
Yeah.
Was it difficult to keep up with the number of stories you needed? You said 22 to 25
Yeah.
per season.
Yeah.
That's a tremendous amount of stories. How do you do that?
Really, its only standing set is Moulder's office at the FBI. And so that means you are on the road creating
Everything.
everything.
Yeah, everything's from scratch.
Everyone was a little movie unto itself.
Yes.
So that was hard. And once again, I hired just the right people, or those people came into my lives. And directors were all important to our success. And there are 4 of them that, I would say they're as responsible as anyone on the show for the success of the show.
And that's not always the case with TV.
It is not. They're guns for hire mostly.
Would like director 1 work on this week and then director 2 work on the next week, and so director 1 would end up coming back for the 5th, something like that?
Yes, it worked kind of like that, where
they took turns or hopped over each other. Would shows be in production all the time?
Yes. You never had enough scripts to begin.
Yeah.
I worked 11 and a half months a year. And if I wasn't writing those extra 2 weeks on vacation, I was already behind. There's a famous Rod Serling quote where he says, if I drop my pencil, I'm 2 weeks behind.
How great was Rod Serling?
That's the TV we grew up on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Genius.
Yeah.
Genius.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Does the government ever turn on the agents over the course of the series?
Yes. And it's all part of the plan. I call them evil geniuses. Kurt Anderson wrote a book called Evil Geniuses. Came out a few years ago. It's excellent. And it really, for me, says a lot about what I was trying to imagine and build into the show for decades. And Kurt Anderson makes a very factual case for this. Where we are today has been in progress for decades, and that this moment in time is the realization of a lot of really careful, drawn out processes with a lot of people who don't necessarily want the best for all of us.
Tell me more about that book. I never heard of it.
It's a wonderful book. Kurt Anderson, he was with Graydon Carter, the co-creator of Spy magazine.
Mm-hmm.
I knew about him. He was very instrumental in my life as a young writer. He wrote a book called The Real Thing. And, I think he had been a member of the Harvard Lampoon. He was very funny and acerbic. And it was just the kind of tone I wanted to develop in my own writing.
Yeah.
And so I read that book. I loved it. And I'm sure I pulled from it so highly unlikely, or I should say, it was completely out of the blue. We won a Golden Globe Award. And I'm being interviewed at the ceremony after we won. And a reporter said to me, compare the Golden Globes to the Emmys. I said, well, it's the same thing. It's Hollywood ballots and et cetera, which I wasn't fudging, but it's the Hollywood Foreign Press who votes for the movies on the Golden Globes, and it's your peers who vote for the Emmys. So I was quoted somewhere, and I think in the New Yorker, Kurt Anderson reamed me. He said, with this quote, he obviously, I don't know what I'm talking about, blah, blah, blah. So I took it upon myself to call Kurt Anderson, this guy who, I admired and now has taken me down. And I said to him, and I just want to talk to you about that piece. I said, because I've been a fan of yours for a long time and I'm going to prove it to you. And I said to him on the phone, I said, horrid yellow grubs colonize my rice bowl, elders knowing smirks. That was the real thing, haiku in his book. And I had carried it with me, or I remembered that haiku. And we ended up talking about having lunch. We never did it, but it was a real memorable moment for me.
What was the Syndicate?
The Syndicate is the group of evil geniuses that the cigarette smoking man is one of the leaders. He was part of the hierarchy who are keeping the secret. And in league...
Do they work for the government or no?
Yes, they do. But of course, there's something called above top secret, which is where they would be. They are in league with the aliens and the colonists, and about what the aliens have plans for. And that figure, I was telling you about this big idea I have for the show, that is part and parcel.
Are the government in on everything in the stories? Is there anything that the government doesn't know about or isn't involved in?
For example, the president wouldn't know about a lot of what the cigarette smoking man is doing. That is that above top secret, the idea that...
But it's still the government.
It is still the government, right?
It's not like some corporate hierarchy outside of the government.
No, although we teased that. Glenn Morgan, one of the amazing people that came to work on the show, he and his partner, James Wong, wrote some of the best episodes, ended up directing some of the best episodes. He actually played with this idea, which is really kind of ripped from the headlines, that we now not only fight wars with our military, we hire these corporate mercenaries, and they go out and they do this work, and they don't necessarily have to operate under the same rules and regulations that our military has to operate under. So they are a kind of a renegade.
NGOs.
Yes, NGOs, exactly.
That works its way into real life too. It's amazing.
Yeah.
How important was it for each episode to stand on its own, as opposed to being, this gets you along in the story?
So if we did 22 to 25 episodes a season, and we only did 4 mythologies, all the rest are standalone stories. And we did what became to be known as Monster of the Week episodes. So, you know, most episodes stand on their own.
And who's Ted O'Malley?
Ted O'Malley is the stand-in for Alex Jones.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, not in real life, but he's
based on Alex Jones.
Our Alex Jones.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you get ideas from listening to Alex's show?
Oh yeah.
Of like what the...
Yeah. In fact, after that season, I got a call from Alex Jones. He says, "Hey, you did a character like me. You want to get together?" And I was busy.
Oh, too bad. It'd probably make for a really good story.
You would have.
LMNT, Element Electrolytes. Have you ever felt dehydrated after an intense workout or a long day in the sun? Do you want to maximize your endurance and feel your best? Add Element Electrolytes to your daily routine. Perform better and sleep deeper. Improve your cognitive function. Experience an increase in steady energy with fewer headaches and fewer muscle cramps. Element Electrolytes. Drink it in the sauna. Refreshing flavors include grapefruit, citrus, watermelon, and chocolate salt. Formulated with the perfect balance of sodium, potassium, and magnesium to keep you hydrated and energized throughout the day. These minerals help conduct the electricity that powers your nervous system so you can perform at your very best. Element Electrolytes are sugar-free, keto-friendly, and great tasting. Minerals are the stuff of life. So visit drinklmnt.com/tetra and stay salty with Element Electrolytes. LMNT.
The first 3 seasons, success was really growing.
It was.
And you're on Friday nights.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, the network decides to put you on Sunday nights.
Yeah.
Why does that happen? How do you feel about it?
Yeah.
What's going on?
It's a good question. And how I felt about it was I was against it.
Yeah.
I had made a joke. I said, my autobiography is going to be called Fridays at 9. So it's like, you know, I loved our time slot. It was...
It worked.
It worked. It
worked.
It was the perfect show on the perfect night. And that's not a night where a lot of people are watching TV.
No.
You know, there aren't a lot of
And
available...
people are creatures of habit.
They are, and everyone goes out on Friday night.
Yeah.
So They didn't give us the most coveted time slot to begin with, but I felt
It worked.
it worked.
Yeah.
It was our time slot. And when they came to me and said they wanted to put Sundays, I'm thinking that's where the Disney shows are. You know, it's Sunday night is like a big family night. And it's like, we're a cult show. I don't want to be a Sunday show. It just had a kind of cotton candy feel to me. But I listened to them and their reasoning, which was not unpersuasive. And the show went to Sunday nights. And the great thing about that is a cult show grew into a big cult show.
Really?
Yeah.
So the audience followed.
The audience followed, and we
And it
gained
grew even more.
new audience, right? Also, one of those things where
could have gone either way.
It could have gone either way.
Yeah. Tell me about the international nature of the show. You did shows in different parts of the world.
Yeah. There's lots of stories about aliens in different parts of the world. There's a thing called the Tunguska incident, which was in Russia, a UFO incident. And so, of course, we went to Tunguska, Russia in the show and played that out, made that part of the mythology. So UFOs, sightings, incidents, abductions have taken place around the world. And so it's still amazing to me that we have this international audience for the show. That someone, Kumail Nanjiani, the actor who we ended up working with, told me that it's like every Friday night, he and his family watch it in Pakistan. And it's like you hear that, it's like, really?
Yeah.
You got it in Pakistan? But, it had a global reach.
It also speaks to the nature of when you're dealing with things that are otherworldly or metaphysical, that's not bound to our culture.
Right.
That's a universal human interest.
You're exactly right. And that was just luck.
Yeah.
Although that Roper survey,
Yeah.
that psychologist friend gave me,
Yes.
really spelled out in scientific terms what percentage of the population actually believed in the phenomenon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At one point, we find out one of the main characters has cancer.
Yeah.
Where did the idea come from, and why did you decide to go in that direction?
It had to do with Scully's abduction and what had been done to her, or what we didn't know quite yet what had been done to her, and that alien intervention or exposure had possibly produced the cancer, but also possibly cured the cancer. So it was really just taking something that had happened. This is where the story starts telling itself.
Yeah.
And capitalizing on it.
You said after the 5th season, you'd do a movie.
Yes.
Where does the idea come to do a movie?
David Duchovny said, because there had been talk about doing a movie, the show.
What can you do in a movie that you can't do on TV?
Well, what you can do is you get, instead of a $3 million budget, you get a $75 million budget.
So it's a bigger production.
It's a big screen approach. And the show and the story you tell has to have that kind of big screen scope. It's got to do something that catapults the show into a new orbit. And that's the plan. But David had come to me and he says, look, there's talk about this movie, but if you are, you're not going to do it, tell me, because I'm going to go off and do something else.
Yeah.
So I thought it's a better idea to do the movie than it wasn't to not do the movie. Ended up, so the whole season 4, I have written the movie script. We are prepping the movie script through season 4 of the show. We're still in Vancouver, and I have a second show on TV. So we are prepping a movie, and I have another show that does 22 episodes a year. I still don't know how I survived. It was the hardest year of work of my life, especially the way I did the work. I'll tell you just quickly also, it's not micromanagement, it's obsession with the show and its success and the storytelling and everything about it. Because, I tried to involve myself in everything. And in the end, it was important to the show, but it was also not necessarily a healthy way to live your life.
Yeah. What was the black oil?
That was my idea, that we've got this product living beneath us that we use with abandon, and it's ancient. And in that substance, which we think of as fuel, there lives something that predates us. And I thought that was like the aliens themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just came to you,
Yeah.
that idea?
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
I was mentioning that a big idea that I was talking about,
Yes.
that I laid in through the last 2 seasons. Actually, part of that, I just had another conversation. It's an ongoing conversation with my brother about existence. My brother, who teaches physics, math is a big part of his life. And we always have this conversation about, are we creating math or are we discovering math? And for me, it's a no-brainer.
For me too, no brainer,
Yeah.
very clear.
Yeah, it's the universe.
Yeah.
And we are just discoverers.
Math is mapping something that we experience,
Yes,
but it isn't creating it.
right.
It's just a way to describe it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That math is some other, call it a higher power, call it God, call it whatever you want to call it, the universe, Mother Nature.
An intelligence.
An intelligence, that's the even better way to put it, is out there. It has created math. You could say that I just saw a play about Rachmaninoff, that Rachmaninoff was discovering that music.
Yes.
I just love that idea,
Yes.
that we are discoverers.
Yes.
We're
We're not truly creators.
right.
We're recognizing things around us.
Yes.
And I think the word I used in the book was either reproducing it or representing it.
Yes.
But it's,
We are the filter then.
yeah, we can put a frame on it and share it
Yes.
and say, hey, look at this.
Yes.
But we're saying, hey, look at the rain.
Yeah.
We're not creating
Yes,
the rain.
right.
We're pointing
Yes,
to it.
Right. Yeah. But my bigger idea,
Yeah.
in part, and it's a part of where I was going with my mythology episodes, is that I want to take it a large step further.
Yeah.
I want to say that, there's this music of the spheres, this idea that the planets are in alignment as such, and it is a musical chord of sorts, that we are seeing a shape of our solar system that may actually predict the shapes of everything else in our universe. And I don't know that this is not untrue,
Yeah.
even though it's kind of unfounded, is
Yeah.
that I wonder if everything, every potentiality, every possibility is out there, and we are simply living our lives based on our finding the best potential outcomes, expressions, etc., that the universe has some kind of beauty to it like that the aliens know.
Beautiful.
That's what the aliens know, is they know those things. And that's why we can't seem to, we see them, but we can't, they know things that we don't know.
I love the idea of the music of the spheres and the idea of harmony being the thing that, I don't know if locks it together is the right word, but if you hear someone singing and then someone comes in and singing a harmony note and they're sharp or flat, when they lock in,
Yeah.
something happens.
Right.
And they vibrate together.
Yeah.
We could feel it in our bones.
Right. I believe it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me about working with the network. Were they helpful? Did they get in the way?
Yeah.
What's good about having
Yeah.
a partner like that, and what's
Yeah.
bad about it?
The bad thing is early on, as I was saying, they anticipate your failure. So they're very micromanaging, hands-on, nervous as can be.
Undermining or not really?
Not undermining.
Certainly not intentionally.
Not intentionally.
No, they want it
just
to do
doing
good.
their job. I mean, these
Yes.
people have jobs,
Yes.
and their job is they're executives to make executive decisions.
Yeah.
But luckily, we were talking about Fox was a new network. We were breaking some new ground. We were doing okay. So they, eventually came to the conclusion that we knew what we were doing. And so that developed through the first 3 seasons of the show. Season 3 may be one of the best seasons of the show. And so everyone was riding high and, go get them. And
did it take all the way to season 3 before they were trusting of you, would you say?
No, I mean, we had a lot of trust and a lot of goodwill, and that's because there are a lot of really good people who worked at the network and the studio who were part of the shepherding process. So we were really lucky in that sense. But we got to season 3 and we had momentum. And in season 4, the team of Glenn Morgan and James Wong came back. They had a show on that didn't go in the end. And they came back to the show and they did an episode called Home. And this is maybe one of the most popular episodes ever on the show. And it's scary as hell. And
what's the subject matter?
It's mutant kids who probably are having sex with their mother. And
we don't know that for sure. It's implied?
We can surmise it.
Okay.
And
so inbreeding.
Killers, inbreeding, and it's a great episode. I don't know how we got it past what they call standards and practices at the in-house censors, but because they believed we knew what we were doing by season 4, it's like, okay, you guys, you know better than we, you know what is drawing an audience.
Where the line is.
Yes. So the episode made it past all the checkpoints, and it aired. And the day after it aired, I got a phone call from the guy who hired me originally, Peter Roth, screaming at me, "Never again. And that episode will never air again. You've gone too far." And, it's like, it started the process all over again. So now all of a sudden we were being watched carefully because we had upset somebody in New York. So, it was, a turning point in the show. We had to be much more careful about, and the censors, that you can imagine, were also given their orders to watch for our shenanigans.
But you also said it was the most popular episode of the show.
Eventually, it became the most popular.
So it's
because it was too scary for network television, is what it was.
Yeah.
And we had broken the rules.
When you were doing it, did it feel intentional on your part, or no? Did it just feel like this is just a good episode?
They pitched it to me in its kind of rough plot points. We did very detailed storyboards, and we, extremely detailed, and that came...
Almost like watching an episode, just with
like
still...
watching an episode. It's with 3x5 cards, but it's a mosaic, isn't it right?
Drawings?
No, it's all hand written descriptions of scenes.
I see.
And there were
no visuals, though.
No visuals. No.
Words.
It's words.
Mm-hmm.
And they pitched it to me in very much rougher shape and form than I was used to. But by season 4, these guys had written some of the best episodes of the show. They knew what they were doing. I knew they knew what they were doing. And so they pitched to me a rough idea, and it was based on a documentary called My Brother's Keeper, which I liked. And so, run with it. You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
It makes my job easier that I can take care of other business. Anyway, the show, as I said, caused a lot of trouble. We did a second movie, and the second movie, they were going to give us a third of the budget of the first movie, and we were going to do what was, in essence, a standalone episode of the show in movie form. And they would give us, a small budget to do that. And so that sounded like an opportunity for me. It was 2008. The show had been off the air for 6 years. Let's revive it and do something good. And they said, we want a PG-13 movie. I said, it's no problem, because network television basically is PG-13.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really hard and painful lesson to learn, is that a PG rating is actually less permissive than network television standards.
Wow.
And so when I turned in the first cut of the show to the studio, not dissimilar to the call that I had gotten about Never Again. I got a very angry talking to by the studio executive saying, "You've gone too far. This is too much. You've got to cut this back. This is not a PG-13 movie. This is not a family movie." And I co-wrote and directed the movie.
Yeah.
And so it was a big surprise and kind of ugly. And so we had to go cut the movie back.
In your mind, those were all things that you could have done on the TV show without it being a problem?
Probably pushing the limits in some ways, but it's a movie.
Yeah.
And so, you want a big screen experience.
Yeah.
So, we trimmed the movie. And then as predicted by this guy, this executive, we ran it in front of the censors, the people that rate movies, and they said, "No, cut it back even farther. You've got to make this for a more limited audience." And it hurt the movie.
For sure.
And I can tell you today that I just got permission to do a director's cut of the movie. Yeah.
That's great news.
Big news. Yeah.
That's great news.
Yeah.
What was the story of the first movie?
The story of the first movie is a mythology episode about experiments being conducted, but that there also is a natural component to the abduction of people that involves a virus, and it's communicated through bee stings. And it's a complicated episode that takes us to the Arctic, where there's an underground base where abductees are being held in suspended animation. And, it's just playing with the mythology and the characters' relationships.
Was there anything on the show ever predictive of the pandemic?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
In the first reboot of the movie, only a few years ago, she was the chief science advisor for the series originally, and she gave me a lot of science that the show ended up being based on. She's a virologist from the University of Maryland. She is the daughter of my wife's longtime friends. So it was one of those things where the Human Genome Project was taking shape, and I had met really interesting people, but she knew about it in depth, and she knew the science. She had given me that episode idea for the science for the final episode of the first season called the Erlenmeyer Flask. And that will figure in this big idea that I keep teasing for the show. It figures in there. But Anne came back to the show as our science advisor, chief science advisor, and she and another woman, a doctor from Canada, convinced me that we needed to do an episode about a pandemic. And we did. We did a pandemic episode before the pandemic.
Wow. Amazing.
It is. It's like, you say in your book, some ideas are...
It's time for it to happen.
It's time for it to happen.
Yeah. Was it common for science advisors to pitch you ideas on possible stories?
No.
Had that ever happened before?
Yes. But no, we actually didn't take pitches from people. It was, I thought, a recipe for unhappiness. And so all the episode ideas were in-house. She would really comment on our science. She would help lead us in directions, but it wasn't an idea.
It wasn't a pitch.
It wasn't ever a pitch.
Who else besides the science and FBI people would say, when you would give them the examples and they would say, well, you could consider this. Were there any other people like in the orbit, either story people or comedians or anyone that would like a way to involve more ideas?
We were rich with ideas, so I have to say no. I was part of a really great team.
Yeah.
And sometimes it didn't work, and there are breakdowns, there are miscues, but the group of writers that worked on the show, the group of producers that worked on the show, made it the show that it became. We grew up with the internet.
Show started pre-internet.
It started kind of with the internet. We were both growing up together,
I see.
Really, because we would go into chat rooms, Glenn Morgan more so than I, and get the feedback if the show aired from 9 to 10,
Yeah.
at 10 o'clock he would hear feedback from fans.
Describe the audience.
It's largely women, and it has a lot to do with the relationship,
Yeah.
I think. But I was still reading, opening envelopes with fan mail, and I opened one, and it was a woman who gave me a critique of the show that I took to heart. What she liked about it,
Yeah.
what she didn't like about it.
I love this.
She convinced me
Yeah.
we had something, but we had to focus on these things. It was kind of that.
When did this come? When in the trajectory?
It came at the end of the first season.
Okay.
So she had watched 20 odd episodes, and I read it and I thought, she's right. It didn't lead me in a direction. It just told me what to focus on.
Yeah.
It almost was like she was commenting on the spirit of the show, what made it an exciting show for her. And it's not that I had forgotten those things or that they were new to me, but it was just her encouragement that struck me. And so I named a character after her in the season finale.
Great.
That episode. If you watch the pilot, the first episode called Deep Throat, and the Erlenmeyer flask at the end, basically that is the foundation for the entire mythology of the show.
Wow.
Yeah.
The show was filmed in Vancouver for many years and then moved to LA.
Yes.
Why'd you move?
The actors wanted to come home. It was like they had been on location for 5 years, and they wanted to, be with their friends.
How did that impact the show, do you think?
I thought it was a good thing. It's among the reasons the show was successful, was it was made in Vancouver. It could double for almost anywhere in the U.S., and the shows took place across the U.S. It had free atmosphere most of the year. It had the personnel who were completely invested in the show, from a PA to a grip to a best boy to a production sound mixer.
Like a family.
Family was in it. And I tell people, they say, how did you do it? And why did you do it for so long? For me, and I always give the same answer, it was that esprit de corps. If you don't have that sense that everyone is working together, and as I say that, in the back of my brain, it says, don't forget about this, is that along the way, saboteurs may be too strong a term, but there are people who don't necessarily have your best interest at heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was the case there in Vancouver?
No, it wasn't actually. I don't want to be cryptic about it, but it was.
Cryptic's your game.
I know, cryptic is my game.
That's what you do.
No, it was just the craziness of producing a TV show. We're in the dramatic arts, and I tell people this. I was on the board of the local theater in Santa Barbara, and I loved the artistic director, and they decided to get rid of him because they had gotten complaints that he was too hard to work with. And I said, we work in the dramatic arts. You deal with dramatic people. These are people who live passionately and have passionate reactions. Temperamental. They're by nature.
Artist.
Exactly. They express themselves. They wanted somebody who was controllable. Well, I say the same thing about what I'm vaguely referring to, is that it's the dramatic arts. You have dramatic people that can cause dramas.
Yeah.
And not necessarily ones that make the show any better.
You said you left a clue at the end of the last episode that's leading towards something big coming in the future.
Yes, yeah.
Did you put that clue there knowing something was going to come in the future?
Yes.
How did you know that?
I just thought the X-Files could go on forever.
Yeah, and it will. Like in your mind,
yes.
If this is an ongoing thing,
yes,
regardless of whatever business situations or the story goes on.
Yes, the story goes on in my mind, and I hope in reality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Were there decisions that you made that you thought were important that turned out to be inconsequential, and the opposite? Any things that you thought didn't really matter that turned out to mean a whole lot? terms of storylines and
Yeah.
plots?
I want to say that there are episodes that came about that changed the course of the show. And I'm going to tell you that there are episodes, but I have to tie them to individual writers like Vince Gilligan, who went on to develop Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul. He had his own brand of X-File that really changed the course of the show. So that was a good hire. It was also somebody you just left alone.
When did he come in? What season?
He came in, I think maybe late season 2.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of those lucky things. We're talking about keep your eyes open, keep your antenna trained.
Yeah.
The man who wrote and directed Risky Business, Paul Brickman, was a friend, and years before the X-Files, he told me about a writer who had written a movie, and the movie was not a hit, but he said, this guy, he's the real deal, and his name is Vince Gilligan. And I remembered it, and so at some point, I realized through my agent, who also represented Vince Gilligan, that he liked the show. He was a fan of the show. So Vince came in and talked to us one day, and we kind of convinced him to write an episode. That episode led to, I think, 7+ years on the show.
Amazing.
And changed the course of the show. But there were other people who similarly affected the course of the show. He would write episodes, and they were big kind of comedy episodes with Frank Spotnitz, who I already mentioned, and John Scheiben. Those three would write episodes together that ended up creating a conquered territory on the show.
As the show got more popular, was it easier to draft really talented writers?
No.
Tell me about that.
It was a hard show to write.
Yeah.
And we blew through some notable writers, but then there are people who just dug in and gave it their all, and I'm still friendly with these people. They made us a success.
What was the Lone Gunmen?
That came from the team of Morgan and Wong. They did an episode where I think maybe Glenn, maybe both of them had gone to a UFO convention and seen these guys who had this kind of conspiracy, and I'm probably doing this a big disservice because it probably didn't happen exactly like this. Whatever it was they saw at that convention, they brought it forward with these guys. The Lone Gunmen had a tabloid called The Lone Gunmen about the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
They became known as the Lone Gunmen, but the paper was called the Lone Gunman.
Yeah.
Anyway, they became very important to the show in storytelling sense because they were people out there on the fringes of the phenomena.
Is it true there was an episode about a plane flying into the World Trade Center?
Yes.
How is that possible?
It wasn't on the X-Files. It was on a spin-off called The Lone Gunmen.
But still, how is that possible? It's too specific.
We weren't the first people to actually suggest this. The World Trade Center was designed to take an airplane strike.
Really?
But a small airplane, not a jet liner. So it wasn't that it wasn't out there as a suggestion or a thought or a concern. So we just capitalized on that.
What are some of the wildest plot lines you can remember that were actually based on stories that were true?
It's hard to answer that. I'll give you an answer by telling you something that is somewhat embarrassing. We're talking about a show that is over 30 years old.
Yeah.
And so
hundreds of episodes.
Yes.
So it's impossible to keep
several
track.
hundred, yes. Yeah. And so anyway, my wife and I decided a couple summers ago to watch the show again from the beginning. And it was mind-blowing.
Great experience?
Great experience.
Yeah.
But I would be asked a number of times during each episode, how did you do that? And my common answer was, I don't remember.
Yeah.
So a lot
Would you be surprised by anything you saw on the show or no?
Typically no, because I was involved in every episode to some lesser or greater degree. So I lived and breathed the show.
Yeah.
So no, they weren't surprising to me, but it was almost sometimes like watching the show for the first time.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Probably in many ways, it was like watching the show for the first time for real, because when you're so involved in making it, you can't really see it
You
with
don't.
eyes
Yes.
like an audience member.
And you are pointing up something that was one of these lightning bolt moments. We did that first movie in season, at the end of 4, beginning of 5, we made that movie. And I had, for 5 years, roughly, before the movie premiered, been watching the show at home with my wife.
Mhm.
And a couple times I went out to in Vancouver on Friday nights, a bar started showing
Oh,
me.
great.
And people came to the
Great.
bar. It was great. And I got to sit with them. And
Yeah.
that was really exciting.
Yeah.
But generally, I watched the show, in the editing room.
Yeah.
So at the premiere of the first movie, I decided to go up to the balcony and watch the show from the balcony. One of the reasons I am doing what I'm doing today and chose my career is I went to see Apocalypse Now on one of its first nights, and I loved it. I loved it. And there's a scene where Frederick Forrest is in the jungle and a tiger leaps out. It's big scare. And so when I saw the movie that night, I went home to San Clemente, whatever that is, 80 miles, and decided I wanted to go back the next night to see the movie again.
Wow.
So I drove to the center of Medone to see the movie again. But I knew the tiger was going to jump out.
Yeah.
So where did I turn my perspective? To the audience. I wanted to watch everyone jump.
Wow.
And in fact, that's what everyone did. And I said,
Yeah.
this is powerful. I want to do this.
Wow.
That balcony experience with the X-Files movie was similar to that, where I got to look down and see, are they laughing at the right point?
Yeah.
Are they jumping at the right point? Are they scared? It was really satisfying.
That's great. Would you call the X-Files sci-fi or no?
Yes.
And what?
I resisted it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's Steven Spielberg always said that Close Encounters was speculative science.
It's great.
Yes. So I went with that.
Yeah,
That's
good.
what I said.
That's
yeah.
great. Do you think of it as a political show?
Yes.
How has the world changed since the X-Files?
That's a good question. I can tell you that the show ended in 2002, and that's very close to 2001, which was a very important turning point in the history of planet Earth.
Yeah.
Everyone loved the conspiracy idea that there was a conspiracy and that the government was not acting in your best interests. And when 9/11 happened, overnight, the government was there to protect us. And we believed that the government was protecting us.
We believed it or we wanted to believe it?
We wanted to believe it because we don't anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We think that, in fact, that's changed, and that now it's called the deep state or whatever it is. But it gave us a clear chance to leave.
Mm. Would you connect the show ending and 9/11 as somehow related?
Yes.
Wow. Is it possible the X-Files is actually nonfiction?
Yes, it is possible, and it has to do with science. Because the show is based on what if, sometimes the what if becomes
If.
yes,
It is.
if. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tetragrammaton is a podcast. Tetragrammaton is a website. Tetragrammaton is a whole world of knowledge.
What may fall within the sphere of Tetragrammaton? Counterculture? Tetragrammaton. Sacred geometry? Tetragrammaton. The avant-garde? Tetragrammaton. Generative art? Tetragrammaton. The tarot? Tetragrammaton. Out-of-print music? Tetragrammaton. Biodynamics? Tetragrammaton. Graphic design? Tetragrammaton. Mythology and magic? Tetragrammaton. Obscure film? Tetragrammaton. Beach culture? Tetragrammaton. Esoteric lectures? Tetragrammaton. Off-the-grid living? Tetragrammaton. Alt spirituality? Tetragrammaton. The canon of fine objects? Tetragrammaton. Muscle cars? Tetragrammaton. Ancient wisdom for a new age. Upon entering, experience the artwork of the day. Take a breath and see where you are drawn.